Okay, so in this video I'm going to be giving details of what the definition of black is, so just to firm up the previous videos, and also what I'm going to talk about in a minute. If somebody gives a definition of black to describe somebody at this point in time, it's the same as if it was done now. So it's a contemporary understanding of what a black man or a black woman is. Doesn't mean that they're, as I've heard some people say when they're sort of trying to debunk the fact that we've been here a long time, is that, oh, if somebody's described as black, it means that they were depressed or melancholy. Yeah, that might be for some poetry somewhere, but in terms of an actual historical account, when somebody is describing somebody, if they're saying they're black, that means that it's what we understand to be a black person, a black people today. So the first port of call is the Random House Dictionary of the English Language, College Edition. And I'm going to go to the page that says black. So that is black, page 139. So the first definition is black: lacking hue and brightness, absorbing light without reflecting any of the rays composing it, as the type on this page. And then the second definition, let's go to the third definition. It says sometimes capitals of, pertaining to or belonging to an ethnic group characterized by dark skin pigmentation, Negro. And then the 24th definition at the bottom of it says dusky, sooty, inky, swarthy, sable, ebony. So, and then it says, any more there of interest? So just to say, so if somebody was to say swarthy, you know that, because a lot of the descriptions of people that I've read say swarthy. So if they're saying swarthy, it actually means ebony or black. Okay, and then just beneath that, there's a definition for blackamoor, which is, first of all, it says it's a noun, and it says offensive, and then it says, gives the first definition, a Negro, and then second, any dark-skinned person, and then it's open square bracket, unexplained variant of blackamoor, close square bracket. So that means, because it's an unexplained variant, this was a point in time when the language was being redefined, so people were asked to vary away from just calling somebody a blackamoor and to now call them a blackamoor, because obviously there was some programming starting to be put in place, and then obviously then the later stages of the programming would be to then drop the a more, so you went from being a blackmoor to being a blackamoor to just being black, which is where we almost, well, more or less are today. So that's to say that this is let's see, this is quite an old dictionary. This publication is fairly new. This was published in India in 1972. But in terms of the text, this is an old definition. These are old definitions of words. And I have an older dictionary here, which is from 1862. So this one was published in 1862. And it is the Webster's English Dictionary, and then just finding black here. So we have black, noun, that which is destitute of light or whiteness, the darkest colour, or rather a destitution of all colour. Very negative. And the second definition is a Negro, a person whose skin is black. And then the third, a black dress or mourning. So that's black, the noun. It's all very dismal definitions, apart from saying, oh, a Negro. So that's why it's good to stay away from defining yourself as black, because it's generally seen as a derogatory, offensive term. So, no, it's really an adjective. You can't suddenly say an adjective is a noun when you feel like it. So, let's see, the next one I wanted to look at was, is there anything else here? I think it has Blackmore here somewhere. Yeah, so Blackmore, noun, a Negro, a black person. So that's kind of clear that in 1862, that was known. If you're saying, describing somebody as black, you're describing them as a Negro, or, you know, it's well known, so it can't be construed as something else. Okay, and then the last one I wanted to look at was the Black's Law Dictionary 3rd edition. And then I wanted to look at the term free white persons, just to give an example of, if you're going to use colour to determine somebody's status, then at least use it abstractly, in the abstract. So that's just common sense. Otherwise, it's too childish. Even children don't define each other by colour. They define each other by whether they're good friends or not, you know, in the nursery, goodness sake. So why we do this and pretend it's a lawful, or, you know, a lawful way to describe somebody is really very childish. It's beyond childish, is what I'm saying. So let me just see, free white persons. Yeah, what I'm looking for is free white persons. So here we go. So just hold it there for a while. You see free white persons there. I'm just going to read it through. It's quite a long definition. I'll read it through. Okay. Free white persons, referred to in Naturalisation Act as amended by Act July 14, 1870, has meaning naturally given to it when first used in Statute 103 C3, meaning all persons belonging to the European races then commonly counted as white, and their descendants, including such descendants in other countries to which they have emigrated. It includes all European Jews more or less intermixed with peoples of Celtic, Scandinavian, Teutonic, Iberian, Latin, Greek and Slavic descent. It includes Magyars, Lapps and Finns, and the Basques and Albanians. It includes the mixed Latin, Celtic, Iberian and Moorish inhabitants of Spain and Portugal, the mixed Greek, Latin, Phoenician and North African inhabitants of Sicily, and the mixed Slav and Tartar inhabitants of South Russia. It does not mean Caucasian race, Aryan race or Indo-European races, nor the mixed Indo-European, Dravidian, Semitic and Mongolian peoples who inhabit Persia. I'll just read that again. It does not mean Caucasian race, Aryan race or Indo-European races, nor the mixed Indo-European, Dravidian, Semitic and Mongolian peoples who inhabit Persia. A Syrian of Asiatic birth and descent will not be entitled to become a naturalised citizen of the United States as being a free white person. And then there's case law. Okay, so the next one I wanted to go on to is this book, which is Jacobite Gleanings from State Manuscripts by J. Macbeth Forbes. And this was put together by that author soon after 1745, and then it is republished in 1903 by Oliphant, Anderson and Ferrier, London. Okay, so the first place I wanted to go in this book is pages 51 and 52. And so on page 51 it says, there was an Edinburgh writer, George Hume, aged 30, marked as a black man, whose colour would no doubt suit the West Indies. On page 52, speaking of Martinique, the island of Martinico or Martinique, its exports were sugar, cotton, cocoa, aloes, coffee, cassia, etc. And the climate was more adapted to blacks than whites. And as you see when I read later on, there were a number of different places in the Caribbean that people from here in England and Scotland were being transported to, if they were Jacobites, as a kind of a punishment, but really it's all to do with money and the fact that they could get money, and you'll see that a little bit later. So it was all, again, it was just programming. The whole thing, it almost looks like it was, the uprisings were almost expected, or, you know, it's anyway, you'll see what I mean when I read further. So it's just a matter of, just to sort of define what I'm sort of saying. Either it was very, very heavily capitalised on, post King Charles I being beheaded for no reason whatsoever, just taken from his chambers and just taken to the Tower of London and just beheaded. Following that, there hasn't really been any redress to actively restore honour. So we haven't, since that point, actually actively had any honourable anybody presenting themselves as either king or queen. That's my thoroughly looked on, I would say. I'm not saying, oh, you know, it's where I'm standing forever if I find a little bit more research and find something else different. But at this point, as far as my own looking into it has gone, there has been no redress of that act, and everybody else following that has kind of been a corporate capitalizer on that event. So they're in a different category, I think, you know, in a natural and in a spirit. So anyway, I'll start with page 7 of the same book, and these are more rhetorical sections of it. So I was say, if anybody would like me to read through the whole book, because it's quite a good read, just put it in the comment section, and I'll sort of do maybe a series over 2 weeks, like bedtime stories, and then you can get the gist of what it's all saying. Anyway, so page 7. What's that? Page 7. Yeah. Okay. So page 7. Okay. Yeah. So it says, passing from these topics to some of the actors in the great drama of the rebellion, which as a military spectacle lasted only 10 months, but the effects of which remain unto us unto this day. We select Sir David Murray, Bart of Stanhope, as a fair specimen of the titled prisoners of the rebellion. He was a youth of only 16 years when he attached himself to the Jacobite party. Being much thought of by Prince Charles, he was chosen to be one of the latter's aides de camp. So a young man, you know, joining up. So, you know, it was real things, and I think it just became a bit of a confused mess, as you'll see as I read a little bit more. And these are only like tiny little snippets I'm reading. Like the whole, if you read the whole thing as I have, you know, you'd get a much richer texture. Anyway, so page 8. Sir James Kinloch, Bart of Kinloch, was immured on 8th of August 1746 along with his 2 brothers, Charles and Alexander, in a room of the Newgale, Southwark, where his friend Sir John Wedderburn, Bart, also was, when Mr. Sharp, Solicitor to the Treasury, came to examine them. Solicitor to the Treasury. Interesting. Why the Treasury? Just said it all became about money. Both of these baronets stated where they were born, but refused, as it appears many others also did, to give any further answers to interrogations. If the Crown wanted information, it must be got elsewhere, was in effect their reply. So that's interesting, because it says the Crown. So to say, number one, because in those days, you know, you could term things for crown and country, so you could use the term crown on its own, and this account says the Crown. So as soon as you put a the in front of a noun, you're reducing that noun to more of a status of an adjective. Say, for example, if you said crown jewels, you're hearing that as crown, 2 nouns, crown jewels. But if you say the crown jewels, you're sort of saying that middle noun is kind of adapted into a type of an adjective. So you're sort of saying the jewels are the crown jewels. So putting a the in front of a noun reduces its impetus. That's number one. And number 2, they didn't say if king such and such or queen such and such wanted information. So it's a very strong assertion there that there's nobody there really to be even recognised. All that's there now is just the corporation. called The Crown. So the next one is page 25. And okay, this is quite a long one, but interesting, very interesting. When I read this one, I thought, wow, this would be a good book to read on YouTube. Anyway, so let's go. John Walkinshaw was taken into custody as a suspected rebel, and the Duke of Newcastle wrote to the military authorities concerning him, when the following reply was received, quote, War Office, 22nd of September, 1746. My Lord, there is one Walkinshaw who solicits for himself half-pay officers, and has been often with me to importune for the beating order for the Scotch Dutch. He was in the rebellion in 1715, a noted Jacobite, and was on the scaffold with Lord Balmerino, whose wife now lives with him. I conclude this is the man your Grace inquires after. I hear he lives in York Buildings. There was a Walkinshaw lieutenant in Lord Stairs who sold out last May, but there is no officer of that name now, and that was written by H. Fox, close quote. Okay, so Mr. Walkinshaw is mentioned as agent for several half-pay officers and some West India correspondents. The execution of Lord Balmerino, who was a courageous and uncompromising Jacobite, took place on the 18th of August 1746, and it is referred to in the following written statement by Mr. Walkinshaw. Quote, I cannot say I have known one cheerful day, but the 18th, when I attended in his last moments the greatest man that ever lived, and was enabled, by I do not know what power, to go through and support that trial. Close quote. He was examined on 3rd of October 1746 by T. Waite of the Crown Office as to the contributors to the defence fund of the rebels, a tyrannical act, as every prisoner has a right to defend himself. The intention may have been to get at persons who were not overt rebels, but who secretly furnished the sinews of war. Quote, being shown an ode upon the victory at Gladsmuir, 21st September 1745, directed to Mrs. Walkinshaw, doesn't know who sent it, close quote. Mrs. or Miss Walkinshaw was his relative, and she was on very intimate terms with Prince Charles. In an intercepted letter dated Carlisle, 27th of September 1746, someone wrote, quote, I depend more on Miss Walkinshaw as either of them, close quote. If so, he was leaning on a broken reed. Lord Byron speculated on the probable effect of Cleopatra joining herself to the chariot of the great Julius Caesar. Had Caesar known but Cleopatra's kiss, Rome had been free. The world had not been his, close quote. So he goes on to say, who can estimate the injury which the Princess Delilah inflicted on the sacred cause of the right divine of kings, by attaching herself to his earthly embodiment in the base manner she did? Lord Rosebery says, when it was represented to the prince that his mistress was not merely a scandal but a spy, he risked his adherence and lost his cause by retaining her. A strong statement to come from one who is no mean authority in matters Jacobite. So as you can see, there's just like a mishmash of confusion. You've got Lord Balmerino being sold out by his fellow